Hello coaches, this is a short video presentation to help you prepare for and write your assignment for Unit 300. If you are currently on the ILM Level 3 Award or Certificate in Effective Coaching, you'll need to complete a written assignment for this unit. So what's in the presentation today? I'm going to review the learning outcomes for Unit 300. I'm going to draw your attention to some of the key documents that you need when you're writing your assignment, give you a few pointers on presentation requirements and some tips and tricks that will help you. So if you haven't thought about your assignment since your training program finished, this is a really good reminder and will just be a short video to take you through the key points. So let's start by just reminding ourselves what's in this qualification. There are 3 units that everybody is required to complete. The Knowledge Unit 300, which everybody completes. The Unit 303 Reflection Unit, which everybody completes. But the only difference between the award and certificate is the practical unit. So if you're currently on the award, it's Unit 301. If you're currently on the certificate, it's Unit 302. Today we're not going to talk about the practical units. That is addressed in a separate video which you will have been sent, or if you haven't had it, please let me know. Email into QED and I'll send it across. So from now on we're going to focus on Unit 300. So what's it all about? Well, this unit is designed to enable you to show your knowledge and understanding of coaching. It very strongly links to your work setting, so you will need to bring in some information about your employer, whether that's a small business, whether it's a local authority or another commercial body. There will be some work context that you'll need to reflect on as part of the assignment. Some of you will be working as groups, and you may want to share this information with your colleagues and discuss it to help you prepare for the assignment. Working together in that way is absolutely fine, but when you put your work together for the assignment, it must be completely your own work and authentic. If you refer to sources of information, references, please do reference your work. There's a guide to how to reference your work in your handbook, and of course you can discuss that at your tutorials with myself or one of the team. Just a note on word count. The word count for this assignment is advisory. You will not be penalised if you go over, but we're looking at between 2,500 and 3,500 words to get this piece of work across the line. Now, my experience is that most people come in at the upper end of that, maybe slightly over. So if you do find that you're writing sort of up to 4,500 words, you're probably still okay. We'll try and keep you within a reasonable word count, but you will not be penalised if you do go over. So just to remind you, there are some documents that you'll need to look at, and you may want to stop the video here and go and grab hold of those. If you've got a physical folder that you had at induction, that's where the documents will be. If you've had a digital folder at induction, that's where the documents will be. And there are 2 particular documents that I'd like you to have a look at. The first one is the assignment brief. The assignment brief sets out what is required for the assignment and outlines the key areas within the assignment that I'll go through in more detail. But it's quite brief, and what's really helpful is if you also look at the Unit 300. Now the unit will be in the second part of your folder. The assignment brief will be in the third part of your folder. So that's where to look. Hopefully you haven't moved things around since you were given that. If it's in your digital folder, then you'll see that it's clearly labelled. It would be quite helpful to have these documents in front of you when you're actually starting to write. And some people, of course, find it helpful to have that physical document. So if you've got a digital folder, you might want to try and get that printed before you start. Looking at Unit 300, the actual unit document, the most useful part of this when you're writing the assignment is the assessment guidance, and it's headed up "The Learner Must", and under that you will see all the requirements for the learner must. And this is what I look at and the team look at when we're assessing your work, to make sure you've covered all those areas, which is why it's so critical. So let's look at the assignment brief. I'm going to just read this through just as a reminder to you. So ILM say you are about to become an internal coach in an organisational setting or start working as an external coach within one or more organisations. This is to ensure that both internal coaches and freelance or external coaches can address this assignment. If you do happen to be an external or freelance coach, it's really helpful to pick one organisation that you're very familiar with to site your work in, to use as your work context. You can draw on more than one, but it's quite helpful to stick with one if you do have one. You have been asked to provide detailed information to clarify what coaching is, its purpose and potential, along with the information about the coaching role, requirements, processes, tools, techniques, recording systems, and standards for best practice. This will provide an opportunity for you to show your knowledge and understanding gained from your learning program, own experience, study, and research. So everybody on our programs will have covered either via workshops or individual sessions with one of the tutor team, all the information you're required to cover in your assignment. We support this with the e-learning module, and the e-learning module is a great resource to tap into when you're writing your assignment because everything that you could possibly want to write about is there. Obviously you can't copy it, you need to write things in your own words, but everything is there. So let's start off with the learning outcomes. This assignment is separated into 4 learning outcomes. The first one, understand effective coaching within an organisational context, is the sort of generic and background information into what coaching is, how it works and so on. The second learning outcome is about contracting. And we will have spent time looking at contracting, and maybe you'll already have contracted with coaches by the time you write this assignment, so you'll be familiar with the process. The third learning outcome is about the actual practice of coaching, or what is called the process of effective coaching within the workplace. And the final learning outcome covers recording, reflection, and coaching supervision. So all the areas that we will have looked at on the course. You are referenced as the learner. So let's break this down a little bit more. Learning outcome 1, 4 criteria. First of all, you're asked to describe the purpose of effective coaching and define what coaching is. It's really helpful here to draw on perhaps some references. It might be something from a slide that I've sent you. It might be a book that you've read, something you've looked at on the internet. If you're going to include somebody else's definition of coaching, you need to add something to that, not just cut and paste it in. So if you've picked a definition that you really like, that resonates with you, say why, explain why you've chosen that definition and how it really links to your organisational context. What is the purpose of coaching? If you're in a sales team, the purpose of coaching might be about increasing performance and improving sales figures. If you're in a much more nurturing and supportive environment, coaching might be more about work-life balance. It might be more about supporting your clients to navigate difficult situations. So you need to contextualize that. Coaching can do lots of things for lots of people, but what is the organisation that you work in trying to achieve with coaching? 1.2 asks you to explore the role and responsibilities of an effective coach. This is not quite the same thing. The role is, if you like, the purpose of the coach and how that actually plays out in the working organisation, whereas the responsibilities are much more about the individual tasks, almost like the job description. So how does a coach's role differ from that of a line manager or a mentor or a trainer? Good to think about that here. And then what do you actually do when you are a coach? That might include things like contracting, recording, providing sessions, ensuring that the coachees actually achieve their goals and so on. So these are similar but not the same, and you need to distinguish between role and responsibility. 1.3, again, this is where you need to separate knowledge, skills and behaviours. You could maybe do that in a table format, but not just a list of skills, knowledge and behaviours, a little bit more explanation around that, so you've identified and reviewed what's really important about each of those 3 areas. You might want to refer to, say, the code of practice, code of ethics that we've looked at in the programme. And then finally, how to overcome potential barriers in coaching. Lots of potential barriers could be between coach and coachee, could be around the organisation, could be around things like time, the skills of the coach, how the coachee feels about coming to coaching, etc., etc. You have to identify too and come up with some useful barriers of how you could overcome these. So that's learning outcome 1. Learning outcome 2 is getting into that initial contact that you have when you start working with a coachee and the process of contracting. So 3 criteria here. First of all, it asks you to look at different methods that you could use to start off a coaching relationship. How do you get to know the coachee? Do you call them? Do you email them? Do you ask them questions? Do you share something about yourself? Have a really good look at the learner must sections for more guidance here, and make sure that you cover at least 2 methods for getting that working relationship off the ground well. Then you can actually talk about in 2.2 the process of contracting. In fact, it's not just the process. You need to be very clear on why we do contract and what the benefits are and what might happen if you didn't. But equally, ILM want to see that you understand the process, and if you've already contracted, you'll know what the process is. It's helpful here to include a reference to the agreement or contract that you're using and say something about what's in that contract so that ILM can see that you understand the importance of the contents. And finally, in this section, we'd like you to cover safe and ethical practice. How do we ensure that we're working in a safe and ethical way? Now, I draw your attention back to the e-learning here as a reminder, the sessions that we've done. We've looked at codes of ethics. We've looked at areas around equality and diversity. We've looked at confidentiality. We've talked about where and when you might meet coachees. So there are lots of areas that could come up under safe and ethical practice. On to learning outcome 3. This is where you're asked to explain what a coaching model is and how it could work. Most of you will probably write about the GROW model. It's entirely up to you though. If you're more familiar with one of the other models like the OSCAR model, feel free to use that. But majority of people talk about GROW. So break it down, explain it, bring it to life with some examples, and also weigh it up, pros and cons. You know, what's good about the model? Is there anything that limits the use of the model? Have you found it difficult? So it's good to expand on that too. Then 3.2 asks you to describe a range of tools and techniques that you could use as a coach. Now, we've looked at lots of different tools and techniques on the program. That could be diagnostic tools such as a questionnaire, learning styles questionnaire, or a personality profiling tool. It could be something like a SWOT analysis, the coaching wheels, coaching visuals like cards or pictures, diagrams. We've looked at different models and so on. So there are lots of different potential areas you could explore there, and you may have your own preferences. You need to cover at least 3 tools or techniques that you could use. So you can really individualize the assignment by talking about your preferences here. Finally, you need to cover a couple of methods in 2.3 of how you will monitor or how you could monitor and review the coachee's progress towards goals. Some people use a wheel to do that. Some people use verbal questioning and reflection. Some people actually physically try to help the coachee to measure on perhaps some scales. It will depend entirely on what the coachee's goals are as to what would be the most relevant method. But certainly you can explore a minimum of 2 methods there that will help you to show that you understand the importance of and the approach to measuring success. Finally, the last learning outcome, you'll be relieved to know, just 2 criteria. 4.1 asks you to explain why we have coaching records, what the benefits and the purpose are for both the coach and the coachee, even the organisation, and then to describe some of those methods, those recording systems. So that could be your contracting, your session records, your reflections, your feedback, your supervision. There's a whole range of records that you could consider there. Again, I refer you to the e-learning where everything's laid out. And then the final criteria, 4.2, asks you to talk about what reflective practice is, why it's important, how you use it, and then link that to justifying why we reflect and also why we have supervision in coaching. We'll have explored this, and there'll be information in the e-learning around what coaching supervision is, why it's recommended. You could refer back to the Code of Ethics here, the Association for Coaching, the EMCC talk about the importance of supervision. So demonstrate you understand why we do it, how we do it, how maybe you do it in your organisation or you will be doing it, and that will be sufficient for that criteria. So that's the end of the overview of what's in the assignment. Again, I remind you, use the Learner Must guidance. That is your real strong guide for this. Reminders here, put your name and your ILM number on the top of your assignment, in the header maybe. Start with a brief paragraph on who you are, where you work, what you do to set the scene for the assignment. Do remember that whoever your tutor is will have got to know you quite well during this process. But actually, we won't be the only ones that look at your work. ILM might look at your work. Our quality assurance team might look at your work. So it needs to be very clear about who you are, what you do, where you work. So a paragraph at the top of the assignment is really helpful. Then make sure that you do read over the assignment brief and the unit before you start writing. Also remember to reference your sources and put a bibliography at the end of the assignment. If you're not sure about this, ask your tutor. We will guide you. There is information in the front section of your handbook. We also love to see your drafts. We're happy to see 1 or 2 versions of your drafts, so feel free to send something over if you need to, and ask for help. Finally, a couple of last-minute pointers here. At the end of this process, you'll be saving all your work into a zip file, and the zip file should have your name and ILM number. This is the same slide as you'll see in the other video or for units 301, 302 and 303. So you need to have your name, your ILM number and the name of the qualification that you're doing as indicated here in the green point on the slide. Make sure that all your files are clearly labelled and then accompany your submission at the end with your ILM authenticity form, which I'll have given you in your packs.